The following compilation features unsettling and spine-chilling tales sourced from Reddit's horror communities. Reader discretion is strongly advised. These narratives may contain graphic descriptions, psychological distress, and themes that could unsettle sensitive individuals. Proceed with caution, as immersion into these eerie stories may provoke fear, unease, and sleep disturbances. Enter this realm of Reddit's creepy horror stories at your own risk, as the line between reality and the macabre may blur within these chilling narratives. I suddenly found myself with 2 weeks of, we make certain parts and ship them to a different country, to a different factory, to put the final product together. The other factory had some equipment broke, and it would take a while to fix. Thus, the sudden time off. I was talking to a few co-workers on the way out of work on my last day, and noticed Jay had parked next to me for once. We went to high school together, and had even been in the same friend group. But we didn't hang out with each other much back then. Since we worked in different areas of the factory, we rarely had time to talk. "What are you doing with your time off?" he asked me with his car door open. "I'm thinking of seeing my grandmother this week. She lives near our old high school," I said with a shrug. He raised an eyebrow as if that was a shock. "Really? I'm going into town too to see my sister. There is also a model train show happening this week too." The best thing about being an adult is you can admit to your boring hobbies without too much judgment. Oddly enough, the model train show drew in a big crowd for the small town we were from. It's most likely because it occurred inside a now-closed station with retired trains brought in for people to see. "Do you remember us hanging out on the tracks in our last year? I can still feel the bug bites." Jay smiled, thinking back to those days. The summer before we all moved, we spent a lot of time roaming the tracks. Sometimes we spent the night, which caused us to get eaten alive by bugs a few times. Jay had been there, but I don't remember us doing much together aside from some fishing. I've wanted to do that again for a while. I miss the good swimming spots. It felt like we had been talking by our cars for a while. I didn't like keeping him when I bet he wanted to rush home to start his vacation. But I said something I didn't even expect from myself. "Do you want to this week? Walk along the tracks again, I mean." He looked a bit surprised at my offer. At first, he opened his mouth to refuse, but slowly started to nod as the idea sunk in. "Yeah, here's my number. Let's plan this out." We quickly got each other's contact information and then started back home. Oddly enough, I thought the little camping trip might be fun. Back then, I didn't realize then how much of a mistake we were making. We met again on Thursday, bags packed and ready to go. We planned to stay out until Sunday. We hiked along those tracks hundreds of times with and without friends, so we didn't need a map. We both agreed on a landmark to stop and then turn back home. The weather was clear for the weekend, but we were to leave early if that changed. The last thing we wanted was to sleep outside in a storm. Back then we had blankets, a stolen lighter, and a tarp. This time we both brought a proper tent, first aid kits, lots of water, as well as anything else we might need. It weighted us down, so we soon needed to change our ending landmark by the middle of the first day. We were walking far too slowly to cover as much ground as we wanted. But the idea of this trip was to just walk along the now disused tracks and not to reach a certain destination. Kinda crazy we both ended up at the same factory so many years apart, I said as we stopped for a lunch break. We sat on the side of the tracks near a bridge looking off into the water below. I had a few jobs before this one. I quickly found out I wasn't meant to deal with the general public. Some people could be far too demanding. Doing the same thing every single day was fine by me. Aside from serving jobs, there isn't a lot around here that don't require some college degree, he said with a sigh, thinking back to his own work history. "What did you do before you got hired at the factory?" I asked, realizing I barely knew anything about my old lukewarm friend. "I was at Red Lobster for a while. I got fired," he said and stopped to take a sip of water. Jay was a mild-mannered guy. He never raised his voice and did as he was told. I couldn't imagine him getting fired for anything. Something that happened 3 months before he started at his current job came to mind. "You were behind the lobster heist?" I asked, shocked. There had been a small news story about an employee stealing all the lobsters from 2 Red Lobster locations and smashing the tanks so new ones wouldn't be brought in for a while. No one was named for the damages because, for some odd reason, no one could prove who did it. It was a revolution, he said evenly, as if that wasn't one of the craziest things I'd heard. I laughed until my chest hurt. He only smiled. I don't think I've ever seen him laugh before. I pestered him on what he did with all the lobsters. He claimed they were in witness protection, which made me laugh more. We didn't cover a lot of ground on the first day, but I think the start of our little outing went all right. By the end of the day, we were exhausted. There was a lot of good, clear, even ground near the tracks to set up our campsite for the night. We built a small fire to cook our dinner of canned beans and spam. "Are you dating anyone?" I asked Jay after I carefully removed the hot cans from the fire pit. "Nope, single." "You're with someone, right?" "Yeah, we've been together for a few years. It wasn't too serious to start with, but now we want to get married and all that. After we saw how much everything costs, we decided to hold off for a while." Having 2 unpaid weeks off work wasn't getting us any closer to our goals, but it wasn't as if any other job paid as well as this one, even missing 2 weeks out of the year. I don't know how most of the people in the factory have been able to get married twice. I guess things were cheaper back then, Jay pointed out. Our workplace had mostly people over the age of 40. I worried about the next 5 years because a lot of the older people who had been there for 30 years are due to retire, taking all their experience with them. Me and Jay were one of the few younger people aside from the contract workers. "Chrissy just got divorced, right? You could ask her out. She would be great to have around if a service worker gets your order wrong," I teased. We both hated Chrissy. She was the biggest Karen I have ever met. I have no idea how anyone dealt with her long enough to get married, not only once, but twice. "I would rather scoop out my own eyes with a rusty fork," Jay replied in such a deadpan voice it made me think he fully meant the statement. I laughed, wishing I knew how funny he was sooner. After we went through the very slim dating options for him at work, we decided to turn him in for the night. Normally it took me forever to fall asleep, but I was so worn out from the day of hiking that I passed out in minutes. I woke up early needing to pee. My back hurt as well as my head. The pain made me question what we were doing out here. It took a few minutes in the morning to shake off the aches and the brain fog. Jay met me outside his tent after I came back from the washroom break. He silently started to take down his tent as I brushed my teeth, still feeling half asleep. "Did you sleep all right?" I had a hard time. It was noisy out here. He started up a conversation after his tent was put away, and he helped me with mine. "Really? We're so far away from everything. What noise could there be?" I asked. "Raccoons having relations with a dying fox. Or at least, that's what it sounded like." I snorted and shook my head. Foxes were rare around here. There were also coyotes in the area, but I've never heard about them ever approaching humans. "You didn't hear any cackling or see any weird stick people figures, right?" I asked with a raised eyebrow. "When I was about 8, I watched The Blair Witch and had nightmares about it for a full week afterward. It took a full year before I could be anywhere near the woods at night. If anything like that happens, we're out of here. I don't fuck with cult stuff or witches." "Unless they're hot," I added. He looked at me debating my point, then nodded agreeing. We got packed up and ready to keep going deeper along the tracks. The second day we slowed down a bit because we kept stopping whenever we saw something interesting. I took photos of oddly shaped trees and long-forgotten items on the side of the tracks. We stopped near a dam under a bridge for a few hours and found a fishing line with a rusted hook stuck in a tree. I cut down the line, tied it to a stick, and Jay dug up some worms. I was shocked that I actually caught a fish with our makeshift fishing pole. We let the fish go and stuck the stick with the fishing line in the dirt for the next person. That day was fun. Since becoming an adult, it felt like my time always had to be towards something. It was rare I could do something for the sake of doing it, and without any other deeper meaning. "Is your girlfriend all right with you being out here for a few days?" Jay asked after our lunch break. "Yeah, she's normally busy over the weekends. She's an artist, so she paints for 3 days straight and takes the rest of the week to recover," I explained. Jay appeared impressed and interested, which made me happy I could brag about the person I cared so much about. Does she make a living from it? I've heard it's hard for artists. I nodded, agreeing with him. I've seen how hard she's pushed herself just to get to where she is. I regret that I couldn't do much to support her aside from helping to buy materials. She sold some works to local galleries and even had her own show last year. She does landscape paintings on the side and sells them at craft markets. She says she's a failure of an artist, but I'm proud of her. I could never do anything like this. I wish she could see how impressive her work is. Jay asked if I had any photos of her work. I pulled out my phone, and for the next half an hour I scrolled through it, showing off what she's done and how many paintings I saved from the trash because she was such a perfectionist. Isn't this one upside down? Jay asked, looking at one of the more abstract paintings. No, maybe. It could be looked at sideways too, I admitted. You don't know the meaning behind her paintings and yet you like them, he said. Art is subjective. I can like the colors and not get the message behind them. I shrugged. He accepted that answer, agreeing with the statement. Dark clouds appeared in the distance, even though it wasn't meant to rain. Thunder rumbled off in the distance, but thankfully it didn't get closer to us. If it started raining, we would need to stop for the day. A cool breeze from the distant storm helped with the humid air. At least the bugs hadn't been too active. We should have hung out more in school, I told him, as I was carefully trying to walk one foot in front of another on the tracks. Yeah, he agreed, but it sounded like he was thinking of something else. I bet if we had more one-on-one time together back then, we would have been closer friends now. Hey, thanks for not treating me the way the others did in school. My foot slipped at his sudden comment. I stopped and looked over my shoulder at him, confused about what he was talking about. Our friend group had a bad habit of trash-talking each other. I heard they had a group chat I wasn't a part of that they all used to vent about people. I always assumed it was about other people outside our circle. What do you mean? I know they were kind of snarky, but we were kids. All kids are like that, right? He gave me a look as if we were talking about the same thing. Wait, do you not know what happened back then? I shook my head, trying to think back to it. We all stopped hanging out with each other near the end of summer. I thought it was because everyone was moving on in life and for no other reason. They found out I was bi and talked shit about it for months before Jason tried to kick my ass. My mouth dropped open as so many things fell into place. I'd seen Jason with a broken arm, but he had said he fell off his bike. Everyone avoided the subject, so I soon forgot about it. He was the leader of our small group. I bet a lot of people lost respect for him for either losing in a fight or taking his bullying too far, and the friend group fell apart. Dude, I had no idea, I admitted. There was a group chat. Jay trailed off. I didn't have a cell phone or a Facebook account until after high school. I can't believe I just wasn't aware of such a big event. Did Jay think I was in on all of that? If he did, then why did he agree to this trip with me? All of a sudden, he started to laugh. My face got red from embarrassment for being so clueless as a kid. This was the first time I'd heard him laugh, and it was directed towards me. Are you still comfortable being out here with me? Jay asked after his laughter died down. The idea of him trying something didn't cross my mind. Should I be worried about something? I half joked. No, you're not my type, he shrugged. Sure, I didn't like guys and I loved my girlfriend, but that stung a little. I shook off the feeling. What is your type? He paused to think for a bit, and I worried he was going to say something I didn't want to hear. Tall, thin if possible, and with long hair. He nodded. There were at least 3 guys at work that fit that description. I wondered if he considered asking them out. Personally, I would never date a co-worker, but I knew some people didn't have a lot of options. Long hair on a guy. Why not just date girls? I pointed out. Because girls have different equipment, and everyone is cute with long hair. That was one way to put it. I directed my attention forwards, unable to think of anything to add to the awkward pause for a moment. Would I be cute with long hair? I joked, trying to ease the tension. Yes, he said with zero hesitation. Still not my type, though. We shared a laugh, and I felt a regret building in my stomach that we hadn't been friends before this. We could have had so many trips like this if we had just talked sooner. I had always been lacking in the friends department. It sucked one had been there the entire time. There was a branching path in the tracks. The left path had been out of use for so long that most of the tracks had been pulled up and missing. The right path was the one we always took. We stopped near the crossroads, staring at something that made us feel scared to be in those woods. A headless skinned deer had been strung up in the trees by the well-walked right pathway by the tracks. The sun was starting to set when we saw it. The orange light made the body appear extra creepy. A feeling in my stomach made me feel like we were being watched, even though we hadn't seen another person for the past 2 days. "What should we do?" I asked Jay. His normally calm expression had a hint of fear on it. We both looked back towards the way we came and up at the darkening sky. "There is a town on the left path. We won't reach it tonight, but being closer to people would make me feel better. We should walk as far as we can, then set up camp for the night. In the morning we'll go into town and get the hell out of here." That was the best option we had. Our phones didn't have the best service out here, and even if they did, I doubt the local cops would come out to pick up 2 scared guys because they saw a skinned deer. It wasn't hunting season, but some locals didn't care. With the cost of everything going up, I bet a lot of people started hunting to feed their families. But why leave it out here? I've never gone hunting myself, but I would have thought having a hunk of meat out in the open would attract other animals regardless if you hung it up. We got our feet moving down the uneven path. The dread of what we saw followed us, no matter how much we mentally rationalized seeing a dead animal out in the woods. We walked using flashlights to guide our way until the middle of the night. Our bodies hurt, and our stomachs rumbled from skipping dinner. We agreed to stop when we came across a cleared spot on the side of the path. Jay's tent was simple enough to set it up in the dark. It was cramped, but we both crawled inside, not admitting out loud how vulnerable being alone would make us feel. We didn't talk as we struggled to fall asleep. Every sound made small bursts of fear shoot into my chest. After an hour of lying awake in the dark tent, I spoke up. "I need to pee," I stated. "Damn it, me too." We both got up with flashlights for the washroom break. After checking that the coast was clear, I stepped out into the bush with Jay close behind. We stopped, and I felt his eyes on my back waiting for me to get this done and over with. "Can you go behind a tree or something?" I asked him. I saw his eyebrow raise in the dark. I'm shy. I hated to admit it, but I've always found it hard to pee with someone nearby. He sighed and listened, his flashlight beam moving around as he found a large tree to step behind. It's a hard task doing your business and holding a flashlight at the same time. I ended up putting it on the ground so I could focus on the job at hand. It took longer than it should have because I kept stopping whenever I heard Jay moving around near me. "Hey, can we..." I started to say after I was no longer exposed. I wasn't able to finish my sentence due to a very hard object smashing into my face. The back of my head cracked against the tree behind me so hard I saw stars. The blow knocked me out, and at least they waited until I was zipped up to attack. A pounding pain woke me up. I moved to find my body on a cold dirt floor. My arms, stuff, and everything hurt. My head was in more pain than the rest of my body. I moved and explosions of colors burst behind my eyes. It took a long few minutes to get to my knees. My hands bound tightly at the wrists. "Hey," came a soft voice beside me. I looked over in the dark room to see Jay sitting next to me. His arms were tied as well, and fear was clear on his face. My heart sank as I looked around the room to see just how screwed we were. The room looked to be an unfinished basement. The dirty concert walls were covered with what I hoped to be water stains. Countless candles filled the space and gave off a suffocating scent. Behind us stood 10 figures wearing deep red cloaks, their faces hidden by darkness. In front of us was a single person in a cloak that had golden accents standing next to a large silver bowl on a tall stand. The bowl had delicate carvings of different animals encircling it. "Well, fuck," I muttered. My heart raced in fear as I tried to think of some way out of this. Before I could start begging to be let go, a set of hands painfully pulled my head back. The figures tried to get me to drink a strange liquid from a golden cup. I struggled and refused until they covered my nose, forcing me to open my mouth to breathe. The liquid burned my throat as it went down. I wanted to puke it back up, but they covered my mouth, forcing it to stay down for a few minutes. Finally, they stepped away as I hunched over, coughing and gagging. My vision blurred, and then the surroundings started to bend. I have no idea what they made me drink, but at least it lessened the pain a little. They did the same to Jay, then hauled him to his feet. He tried to stay in control, shaking his head clear of whatever they gave us. He was outnumbered and was forced to the front and next to the silver bowl. I watched in horror as the leader of the figure grabbed his head to pull his head back to expose his neck as the other held his arms. He thrashed, unable to get free of their hands. My body wouldn't listen to me. My legs were jello and my head spun as I Saturday still. I opened my mouth to call out his name, finding no words. A long silver dagger glinted in the candlelight. I could let out a squeak of horror as the blade was pressed against my friend's throat, dragging across the flesh. Blood freely flowed from the wound as Jay let out a terrible garaging sound. At least the cut didn't appear too deep. Deep down, I prayed if we could just get out here, he would be all right. The figures started to chat strange words I didn't understand. The blood in the bowl started to boil, and the candlelight changed to a deep blue hue. The words became louder and louder, pounding into my brain. I heard another sound that took me a moment to realize. I started to yell for it to all stop. A spark came from the wall in front of us. The cloaked figures were so focused on that they weren't paying attention to Jay. He slammed into them, getting free. The leader was next, as his shoulders checked the man to the ground. The chanting lessening but not stopping. They did a poor job of tying Jay's wrists. He snapped the ropes, getting his hands free to grab the dagger that had been dropped and sinking it deep into the leader's chest. My mouth fell open in shock as a tiny bit of hope came. It was gone after what happened next. My eyes landed on the sparks coming from the wall and everything slowed down. The sparks became colors and shapes I'd never seen before. They melted into each other, drawing me in. I lost all sensation in my body. For a while, the only thing that existed was the otherworldly sight. A hard slap to my face brought me back to my senses. It came too late. Something burst out of the sparks and landed on all fours, knocking over the silver bowl and spilling out the collected blood. At first, it appeared to be a thing, a tall man with long black hair dressed in rags. A set of arms sprouted from his back as his face opened up. The flesh on each side spread out, showing a pit of teeth. In a flash of movement, the creature skittered around on the walls and ceiling, its body shifting into different long and gruesome forms. Jay stayed next to me, urging me to get to my feet. My body was too heavy to move. I simply could not stand up. I told him to leave, but he refused. The creature bolted around the room, picking off the hooded figures one by one in a display of bloody cruelness. Soon, it drew its attention towards us. It suddenly appeared in front of us, standing tall with a human face. The dark cloth around his body moved, ready to change at any moment. I looked into his eyes and fell into a deep, unnatural despair. This monster was going to rip me apart, and there was nothing I could do. His body lurched forwards, mouth open, about to rip flesh from bones. Jay's hands shot out and grabbed the creature by the face. He did something that snapped me from whatever spell the odd liquid had put me under. He pulled the creature's face to his own to force them into a kiss. I Saturday there, utterly confused about what I was seeing. My mind cleared up enough for my brain to notice Jay had freed my hands while the monster had been attacking the others. I started to move, ready to use this chance Jay gave us. The creature was as shocked as I had been for a few seconds. Then it reached up to grab a hold of Jay's face, forcefully keeping them together. To my horror, thick black liquid poured from the creature's mouth and overflowed through Jay's mouth, forcing its way down his throat. Muffled screams of pain came from him, the liquid touching his wounded throat and attacking the gash. No, it was closing the wound. I couldn't waste time. Racing over, I grabbed the dagger out of the dead leader's chest. With a burst of determination, I rushed over to put all my weight into bringing it down to the monster's back, mentally ordering it to stop hurting my friend. The dark shape arched back, hands at its sides screeching in pain. It lashed out, and a powerful arm hit my chest so hard I went flying. My body slammed against the wall, knocking me out cold. I thought I was dead. Instead, I woke up to the sounds of birds singing. I was in Jay's tent, bundled in blankets, my eyes heavy from sleep. Soon, pain from the previous night surfaced. I pushed it down to keep my eyes on Jay's back, watching him breathe in his sleep. Had I dreamed the entire thing? Carefully, I Saturday up to look him over. He peacefully slept on his side, blankets pulled up covering half his face. Slowly, I got out of the tent to look around. In the light of dawn, I didn't recognize our campsite. I washed my face and got started on brushing my teeth. I felt like if I acted normal, it would make the night's events into a dream. It was an oddly chilly morning. Jay soon crawled out of the tent, bundled up. We got to work breaking down the campsite and packing up. Neither of us said a word as we started back where we came from. The dawn fog cleared and the morning sun chased the chill away. And yet, Jay didn't remove his layers. Before noon, we stopped at a bridge. I knew this bridge and didn't want to believe where we stood. Once we crossed this, our cars were a short walk away. It should have taken much longer to get here. I was glad to be nearly out of the woods, but this wasn't right. I turned to face my friend, finding him a few feet away. "This is me," I said, the words causing a hole in my chest. "What are you talking about?" "Let's go," I told him. I took a step towards him. He took a step back. The smile never left his face. "Thanks for asking me to do this. I had fun." I shook my head, not wanting to hear any of this. "I'm sorry. I didn't do anything to help," I started, but he cut me off. "There was nothing you could have done. It's not your fault." I couldn't accept that. I couldn't accept any of this. Dark shadows moved in the trees next to the tracks. Countless eyes watched us, waiting. I did have fun. It was like being a kid. I never really got that chance to just hang out with someone and not have the fear of them talking behind my back. You were a good friend. I hated how final this all sounded. I decided to go over to him and drag him back, kicking and screaming home. I took 2 steps forward, and the shadows in the trees reacted. A burst of dark black smoke came between us, sweeping away Jay as if he had never been there to start with. I yelled for him while running towards where he had stood. I fully planned on not leaving without him. A wave of crippling fear hit me. It stopped me in my tracks, my body shaking with cold sweats. Some unseen force told me I was free to go, but if I pressed on, I would not leave these woods. Either one of us left here or neither of us did. I hated myself for turning on my heels and leaving Jay behind. My girlfriend noticed something was wrong when I came home. I lied, saying I was just tired. For the next few days, I stayed in bed, unable to forgive myself for what happened. No one came looking for Jay. He sent out a message to the people he knew that he would be gone for a little while longer. I soon realized he didn't have very many people in his life who would notice his abstinence. He could simply disappear without anyone making a fuss. I haven't been able to figure out what we came across in those woods. The small town near the old pathway burned down. No one was reported missing or killed. The fire swept away any kind of clues about what still lurks in that forest. I don't know if Jay is safe with that monster. At the very least, whatever that thing was, seemed to be his type. Tall, thin with long hair. I would like to think he would laugh over me thinking that. I'll miss him and regret losing a friend just as I got to know him. But I think he's glad one of us was able to be free to live a normal life. I turned 18 in 2008, and on the day of my birthday, for reasons I won't bore you with, I packed up my things and moved out. For 4 years, I lived in my car, working as a barista from 6 to 2 and as a line cook from 4 to 10. My plan was to work until I had enough money for my own place, and then to either go to college or get a real job. Looking back on it now, I don't know how I did it, but by 22, I'd saved up a decent sum of money and began my hunt for a semi-permanent place of residence. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and though housing prices weren't as bad as they are now, it was still a pricey county. After months of asking around, I was connected with Anders, an elderly man who was leasing a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house in North Hollywood for far below market rate. The catch, because there's always a catch when it comes to affordable housing, was that the house had been terribly maintained. It had been unoccupied for a year and would need some serious TLC before most people could comfortably reside in it. However, had been living out of a car for 4 years. As long as the place had running water, it would be an upgrade for me. I moved into the house in fall 2012. Anders gave me a tour before I got settled. He was a short, joyful old man. Well-meaning, but how do I put this? Maybe not the most focused as a result of his age. At one point during the tour, he showed me the bathroom, then the master bedroom, then the bathroom again, then the master bedroom again. He was about to walk into the bathroom for a third time before I gently guided him down the hall. The house itself was livable but weathered. Dim lighting from outdated fixtures cast long shadows over peeling wallpaper. The ceiling in many of the rooms was discolored from past leaks. The faucet in the kitchen sink was broken. The bathtub was badly chipped, and a few of the cabinet handles fell off in my hand. It was a rundown place, located in a bars on the window kind of neighborhood, but still, it was my place. I was smiling ear to ear when Anders gave me the keys. "It's a good house with good bones. You take care of it. Now," he instructed, which I found ironic. Before he left, he paused in the front doorway, drawing a hand to his chin as he looked behind me into the house. I tried to follow his gaze, but couldn't figure out what he was looking at. Everything all right? Yes. Just that something looks different about that bathroom, though I can't put my finger on what. Ah well, it's a good house with good bones. You take care of it. Now. And with that, he gave me a nod and left me to my unpacking. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed living in a house. I didn't care how run down the place was. Just having an accessible bathroom and a full-size mattress to sleep on made me feel like a king. After I'd spent a few days cleaning the place up, I invited my sister and her fiancé over for dinner. I'm sure it sounds stupid, but my newly acquired ability to host company made me proud. In no time at all, I'd comfortably settled into my new home. That evening, after saying goodbye to my guests, I took a shower. The bathroom lacked a traditional, above-the-sink mirror. Instead, it had a wide, full-length mirror mounted on the wall to the left of the vanity. When I exited the shower and stepped up to the glass, raising a hand to wipe away the fog, I noticed something odd. In the condensation, right at my eye level, was the word "hi." I didn't know what to make of it. Somehow, the letters seemed intentional. It was hard to pass off as simply the way the steam had settled. My sister had been in the bathroom just before she left. Maybe she had written the word on the mirror with her fingertip, and the steam had only made the letters visible after my shower. I almost texted her about it, but the message seemed ridiculous when I typed it out. Paranoid, even. I wiped the mirror down and turned in for the night, and soon I forgot about it entirely. The following week, I received a promotion at one of my jobs, and while I was grateful for the additional income, my new position meant longer days. Additionally, I realized that a few of the house repairs were beyond my ability, and so I started outsourcing some work to contractors. It was annoying to only have the house to myself at night, but I didn't have another option with my busy schedule. Things were generally progressing smoothly, though every once in a while, in the middle of the night, I would be awoken by a sound that I couldn't quite place. When I next noticed writing on my mirror, I had been living at the house for a month. The second sighting occurred in much the same way as the first. I came back home after work and took a shower. When I pushed back the shower curtain, I looked at the glass and saw, written in the condensation, the words, "Staying long." Now, I could pass 2 letters off as a coincidence, but 2 words, an entire question? That was no coincidence. Someone had been in my bathroom, and recently, I had contractors in and out of my house all the time, so one of them could have written the message. But why? I got dressed and put a hand on the bathroom doorknob, about to go back into my bedroom, when it occurred to me that whoever had written the message might still be around. I slowly cracked open the door, peering down the dark hallway in one direction, then the other. I listened very carefully, but heard nothing. I walked around my house, which didn't take long given its size, and looked for anything out of place. All of my doors were locked. All of my windows were shut. and none of my personal items had been disturbed. If someone had broken into my house, they were long gone by the time I looked around. That second message put me on edge for days. I triple-checked that my windows and doors were locked each night. I looked in every potential hiding spot, of which there were few in my little house, after I came home from work and before I went to sleep. And yet, though I was certain that my house was secure, I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. A month passed without incident. I had almost started to feel at home in my new lodgings again until, one Friday morning, I awoke just past 3 a.m. I couldn't immediately tell what had woken me. Often, the house settled at night, creaking and groaning in ways that made it sound alive. But in that moment, the house was silent. It was only after I turned my head to the side did I realize that my bedroom door, which I was certain I had shut, was wide open. I stared down the hallway, feeling as though I were gazing into a black hole. The darkness was abyssal. I kept waiting for my eyes to adjust, waiting for them to pick out the familiar shapes of my home. But they never did. I couldn't see a thing, so why did I feel like something could see me? Like there was something in the house with me, just feet beyond the threshold to my bedroom, watching, waiting. Somehow, I found the courage to rise from my bed and walk toward the door. When I made it to the handle, I grabbed it and slammed the door shut. I didn't investigate further, didn't so much as stick my head out into the hall for a closer look. My bedroom door didn't have a lock. None of the doors except the bathroom did. So I dragged my bookcase in front of the door. It was a small bookcase, and an intruder could probably ram the door open anyway if they wanted to, but not before the sound alerted me. When morning came and I had to leave the house for work, I genuinely considered exiting my house through the window. I was almost late by the time I worked up the nerve myself to look around my house before I left. As always, I found nothing amiss. After work, when I reluctantly returned home for the night, I ate a quick dinner and hopped in the shower. I remember standing in the tub for a long time, mulling over my predicament. I'd heard horror stories about people secretly living in other people's homes. Maybe I had become a victim of a frog without even knowing. But if that was the case, then where the hell were they? There was nowhere to hide in that tiny house. I'd torn the place apart multiple times by then, checking every cabinet and closet. The inside of the house couldn't be accessed from the crawl space, and the air vents were too small for a person to fit in. Suddenly, I heard a click, so tiny that I'd almost missed it entirely. I tore back the shower curtain, gripping the shampoo bottle like I was about to bludgeon an intruder to death with it. As I'd come to expect, there was no one in the room. But there was a new message on the mirror. This one was bold, the easiest to read of any of the messages I'd received so far. It was 3 words long. I see you. Some awful amalgam of fear, confusion, and anger made my stomach churn. Ultimately, the latter emotion rose above the rest. I hastily dried off and threw on some clothes, then grabbed my phone from where I'd left it on the bathroom counter. I punched in Anders' number and glared at that damn mirror as I listened to the phone ring again and again. I'd started to think it was too late for him to be awake when he suddenly picked up. He started to ask me how I was faring in my new lodgings before I cut him off. I need you to tell me if there's some way that a person could be getting into the house, I said. Every night, I check every window and door. I check every cupboard, closet, and cabinet, and still things are amiss. You need to let me know if there's some entry point that I'm not aware of. Anders didn't seem to entirely understand what I was asking. What's getting in? You let me know if you're having rat troubles. My last tenant before you had rat trouble sometimes. Yeah, sure. I've got rats. Besides the doors and the windows, how could they be getting in? Well, there's the vents, of course, and there was a chimney once, though we had it sealed up a good long while ago, and there's also the crawl space. Of course, though I'm sure you've already poked around down there. Though I knew the home had a crawl space, I'd never had much reason to investigate it. I was never able to find the entrance, even after ripping up all the carpeting in the house. Likely, hardwood had been installed over the access door, making it an unlikely point of entry for an intruder. How do I get down to the crawl space? Yes, you should give the crawl space a gander. I barely stopped myself from smashing the phone into the counter. I plan to. Where can I find the entrance? That'll be on the floor of the bathroom closet. I looked around the room. Surely I'd misheard him. Either that, or he was confused again. What? I know. It's an odd place for it. But it's only there because that room didn't always used to be a bathroom. The bathroom doesn't have a closet. Sure it does. Just to the left of the vanity. I looked at the mirror, at that long, oversized mirror. I'd always found it odd for a bathroom of that size to have a built-in floor-to-ceiling mirror. What was it that Anders had said when he'd first visited? That something had looked different about the bathroom. Setting my phone down next to the sink, I stepped up close to the glass. I spent a few moments feeling around the frame, looking for a latch. Then I grabbed a portion of the right side of the frame in two hands. After one hard yank, the mirror swung open like a door, revealing a large walk-in closet. Anders was saying something on the other end of the line, but I was too stunned to answer. There was a square-shaped hole at the back of the closet, which I assumed led down to the crawl space beneath the house. The closet floor was littered with all kinds of trash, filthy sheets, fast food containers, beer cans, and, I realized, some of my own items, little things I thought I'd misplaced. A sock, a toothbrush, a comb, and a small, framed photograph of me, my sister, and our old family dog. I crouched down to pick up the photo, perched in the doorway as I studied my younger, smiling self. I heard Anders saying my name over the phone, except the voice didn't sound much like Anders at all. It was too deep, too clear, too close. When I looked up, a man was peeking out at me from the hole in the floor. He smiled at me, his eyes wide and pupils blown. His smile so wide it looked painful, and his hair long and matted. He was only visible from the neck up, and the harsh lighting made it look like a disembodied head was grinning at me from the back of the closet. Horrified, I rose to my feet and ran. I didn't stop running until I made it to my car, which I promptly drove to my sister's house. The next day, I drove to the police station to file a report. An officer met me at the house to check the scene, and I showed him the hidden closet, which indeed had an entrance to the crawl space. My best guess was that the intruder was entering my crawl space from the small door on the side of my house. He'd likely been squatting in the house during the year in which it sat unoccupied, and when he saw it was being prepared for sale, he had disguised the closet door so as to keep a little room for himself. Why he decided to stay, or why he was leaving me messages, I can't say. From his actions, and from what little I saw of him, I think it's safe to assume that he wasn't of sound mind. Unfortunately, the man was never found. For all I know, he's still in that same neighborhood. Hell, he might even be in the same house. I moved across the county afterwards and have lived in studio apartments ever since. The thought of living in a big house with all those rooms and corners and places to hide gives me the creeps. It's not just houses that the incident soured for me, but mirrors as well. These days, when I visit a friend or stay at a hotel, I always have to carefully inspect the bathroom mirrors, shining a light directly into their faces and tapping a finger against the glass. Because the worst detail of the whole ordeal was that, when revisiting the bathroom with the police officer, I stepped into the old closet, closed the door, and looked into the mirror. Instead of my reflection, I saw the officer's face on the other side of the glass. I never thought I'd be sharing this story on Reddit, but I need to get it off my chest. It's been 3 months since that cursed Halloween night, and I still can't shake the horror of what happened to my little girl, Emily. I'm hoping that by writing this down, I might find some answers or at least some peace, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. I'm a single dad, have been for the last 5 years since my wife passed away. Emily's all I've got, and I'd do anything to protect her. She just turned 10 this year, and she's the spitting image of her mum. Blonde hair, blue eyes, and a smile that could light up a room. Emily's always been a creative kid. Give her some crayons and paper, and she'll spend hours lost in her own little world. But this year, as Halloween approached, Her creativity took a turn that I never saw coming. It all started about a month before Halloween. Emily and I were having our usual Saturday morning pancakes when she brought it up. "Dad," she said, syrup dripping down her chin, "can we talk about Halloween?" I smiled, passing her a napkin. "Sure thing. Kiddo, what's on your mind?" Her eyes lit up. "I want to make my own costume this year. Something really special." Now, I'm not the most artistic guy in the world. My idea of arts and crafts is sticking a magnet on the fridge. But seeing the excitement in her eyes, how could I say no? "That sounds like a great idea," I said. "Any thoughts on what you want to be?" Emily scrunched up her nose, thinking hard. "It's this little quirk she does that always reminds me of her mom." "I'm not sure yet," she admitted, "but I know I want a mask, a really cool one." And so began our month-long Halloween project. Every evening after dinner, we'd sit at the kitchen table, surrounded by craft supplies. Emily would sketch out ideas, and I'd do my best to help bring them to life. We tried paper mache, disaster, plastic molds, even bigger disaster, and about a dozen other techniques we found on YouTube. As the days ticked by, I could see Emily getting more and more frustrated. Nothing was turning out quite the way she wanted. Then, 2 weeks before Halloween, we made a trip to the craft store. Emily was quiet as we walked through the aisles, her earlier excitement replaced by a sort of grim determination. That's when we stumbled upon the mask section. There, sitting on a shelf, was a plain white mask, just a basic face shape with holes for eyes and a mouth. Nothing special. But Emily's eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. "Dad, look," she whispered, pointing at the mask. "It's perfect. We can decorate it ourselves." I didn't think much of it at the time. It was just a mask. After all, how wrong I was. For the next 2 weeks, Emily spent every free moment working on her mask. She painted it with swirls of purple and black, added glitter around the eyes, and attached feathers along the edges. I had to admit, it was looking pretty cool. But then, 3 days before Halloween, things took a turn. I was in the kitchen making dinner when I heard Emily call out from her room. "Dad, can you come here for a sec?" When I walked in, I found her sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by craft supplies. In her hand was a pair of scissors, and on the floor next to her was a small pile of blonde hair. "Emily," I gasped, "did you cut your hair?" She nodded, grinning, just a little bit. I wanted to make the mask extra special. I watched in stunned silence as she carefully glued the lock of hair onto the forehead of the mask. Something about it made my skin crawl, but I chalked it up to the shock of seeing her cut her own hair. "There," she said, holding up the mask. "Now it's perfect." As I looked at the mask, with its swirls of color and that lock of real hair, a chill ran down my spine. Something about it felt wrong, but I pushed the feeling aside. It was just a Halloween mask, right? That night, as I tucked Emily into bed, I noticed her staring at the mask on her dresser. There was something different about her expression, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. "You okay, sweetie?" I asked. She turned to me, smiling. "Yeah, Dad, I'm just excited for Halloween." I kissed her forehead and turned off the light. As I closed her door, I could have sworn I saw the mask's eyes glint in the darkness, but that was impossible. It was just a mask, wasn't it? I wish I could say that was the end of it, that Emily wore her mask on Halloween, had a great time trick-or-treating, and everything went back to normal. But that's not how this story goes. Not even close. The night before Halloween, I woke up to a strange sound. It was like a whisper, but not quite. More like the rustle of leaves in the wind. But we live in an apartment on the 5th floor. I lay there in the dark, my heart pounding, trying to figure out what I was hearing. Then I realized it was coming from Emily's room. I got up, my bare feet silent on the cold floor. As I approached her door, the sound got clearer. It wasn't leaves, it was giggling, but not Emily's giggle. This was higher, almost squeaky, like something from a cartoon. I pushed open her door, expecting to find her awake, maybe watching videos on her tablet. Instead, I found her fast asleep, curled up under her blankets. The giggling stopped the moment I entered the room. That's when I saw it. The mask. It was on her dresser where she'd left it, but something was different. In the dim light from the hallway, I could have sworn the painted mouth was curved into a smile it definitely didn't have before. I shook my head, blaming it on my sleepy brain playing tricks on me. I was about to leave when Emily stirred. "Daddy," she mumbled, her eyes still closed. "It's okay, sweetie," I whispered. "Go back to sleep." But she didn't. Instead, her eyes snapped open, and for a split second, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Her eyes, usually a soft blue, looked almost black in the darkness, and they weren't looking at me. They were fixed on the mask. Then she blinked, and everything was normal again. "What's wrong, Dad?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. I forced a smile. "Nothing, honey. I just thought I heard something. Go back to sleep." As I closed her door, I heard that giggle again, but this time, it sounded like it was coming from inside the room. Halloween morning arrived, and Emily was bouncing off the walls with excitement. She insisted on putting on her costume right after breakfast, even though trick-or-treating was hours away. "Can I wear my mask now, Dad? Please," she begged. Something in my gut screamed no, but I couldn't think of a good reason to refuse. "Okay, but just for a little while. You don't want to get tired of it before the big night." The moment she put on the mask, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Emily stood there, completely still, for what felt like an eternity. When she finally turned to face me, I had to stifle a gasp. The mask looked alive. The painted swirls seemed to shimmer and move, and the lock of hair on the forehead was swaying gently, even though there was no breeze in the room. "How do I look, Daddy?" Emily's voice came out muffled and strange from behind the mask. "Great, sweetie," I managed to choke out. "Why don't you take it off now? Save it for later." But Emily didn't move. She just stood there, staring at me through those painted eyes. Then, slowly, she raised her hand and stroked the hair on the mask's forehead. "But Daddy," she said, her voice suddenly deeper, almost adult-like, "I don't want to take it off. Ever." That's when I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong, and it was only going to get worse. I tried to convince myself it was just Emily playing a Halloween prank. Kids do that, right? But deep down, I knew this was something else, something worse. As the day wore on, Emily refused to take off the mask. She barely spoke, and when she did, it was in that unnaturally deep voice that made my skin crawl. I tried to get her to eat lunch, but she just sat there, staring at the plate through those painted eyes. By late afternoon, I was at my wit's end. "Emily," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "it's almost time to go trick-or-treating. Why don't you take off the mask for a bit? Give your face a break." She turned to me, moving her head in a way that was just wrong, too smooth, like a doll being posed. "No," she said, that adult voice sending chills down my spine. "The mask stays on." I reached out to take it off myself, but the moment my fingers touched the edge, pain shot through my hand like I'd been burned. I yanked my hand back with a yelp, staring in horror at the angry red marks on my fingertips. Emily giggled, but it wasn't her giggle. It was that high-pitched sound I'd heard the night before. "Silly Daddy," she said, "the mask doesn't want to come off." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. "Emily," I said, my voice shaking, "what's happening to you?" She cocked her head to the side, an unnatural angle that made my stomach lurch. "Emily's not here right now," she said, and I swear I saw the mask's mouth move as she spoke. "But don't worry, Daddy. Soon, there won't be any Emily left at all." I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a nightmare, but the pain in my hand told me it was all too real. I ran to the phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. But before I could hit call, the lights in the apartment flickered and died. In the sudden darkness, I heard that giggle again, closer now. "Who are you?" I shouted into the darkness. "What do you want with my daughter?" The giggle turned into a laugh, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Want?" the voice said, no longer pretending to be Emily. "I want what every lonely spirit wants, a body to call my own." A flash of lightning illuminated the room for a split second, and I saw her, Emily, or what used to be Emily, standing in the doorway. The mask had changed. The painted swirls were moving, twisting across its surface like living things. The lock of hair had grown, cascading down over Emily's shoulders. But the worst part was where the mask met Emily's skin. I could see tendrils, like roots or veins, spreading from the edges of the mask, burrowing into my daughter's flesh. "No," I whispered, horror and despair threatening to overwhelm me. "Please, no." The thing wearing my daughter's body took a step forward. "Oh yes, Daddy," it said, its voice a terrible mixture of Emily's and something ancient and evil. "And guess what? There's room for two in here." As it lunged towards me, mask first, I realized with sickening clarity that this Halloween night was far from over, and that the real horror was just beginning. I don't remember much of what happened next. It's all a blur of terror and desperation. I remember running, stumbling through the dark apartment, the thing that used to be my daughter always just a step behind. I remember the sound of its laughter, a horrible mix of Emily's voice and something ancient and evil. At some point, I found myself in the kitchen. As lightning flashed outside, I saw a gleam of metal, scissors, the same ones Emily had used to cut her hair for the mask. I grabbed them just as the thing lunged at me again. What followed was the most horrifying moment of my life. I fought against the creature wearing my daughter's body, trying desperately to cut away the mask without hurting Emily. But every time the scissors touched the mask, it seemed to grow, those root-like tendrils spreading further across Emily's face. "You can't save her," the thing hissed, its voice a nightmarish blend of Emily's and something inhuman. "She's mine now, and soon you will be too." In that moment, as I looked into the painted eyes of the mask, I saw something that chilled me to my very soul. Behind those eyes, in the depths I couldn't explain, I saw Emily, my little girl, trapped and terrified, silently screaming for help. Something in me snapped. With a roar of rage and fear, I tackled the creature to the ground. We struggled, rolling across the floor, knocking over furniture. I could feel the mask trying to attach itself to me, those tendrils seeking my skin. The pain was excruciating, like 1,000 needles stabbing into me all at once. But I didn't let go. I couldn't. This was for Emily. In a final, desperate move, I managed to get my fingers under the edge of the mask. The pain was blinding, but I held on, pulling with all my might. I heard a sound like tearing flesh, felt something give way. And then, suddenly, it was over. The mask came free in my hands, writhing and twisting like a living thing. Without thinking, I threw it into the fireplace and lit a match. The mask seemed to scream as the flames engulfed it, the painted swirls melting and bubbling, the lock of hair curling and blackening. In moments, it was nothing but ash. I turned to find Emily lying on the floor, unconscious but breathing. Her face was covered in angry red marks where the mask had attached itself. But she was alive. She was my Emily again. That was 3 months ago. Emily's recovering, slowly but surely. The marks on her face are fading, but I fear the scars on her mind will take much longer to heal. She doesn't remember much of what happened, and part of me is grateful for that. But sometimes, late at night, I hear her whimpering in her sleep, and when I go to comfort her, I see her hands moving, as if trying to pull something off her face. As for me, well, I haven't slept properly since that night. Every time I close my eyes, I see that mask. I feel those tendrils trying to burrow into my skin, and I hear that laugh, that terrible laugh that wasn't quite Emily's. I know it's over. I know I burned the mask. But sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I swear I see something moving just beneath my skin, and in my darkest moments, I wonder, did I really destroy the mask? Or is it just waiting, biding its time, ready to emerge once again? I pray I never have to find out. But this Halloween, we're keeping the lights on, and there will be no masks in this house. Not ever again. I used to like hiking. I say used to. Because if I ever get out of here, I'm never doing it again. I live in West Virginia, and just about the only good things about it, really, are the nature and the folklore. So I've always spent as much time as I could outside. I've encountered some relatively weird stuff up until this point. So when I saw the staircase leading down into the ground in the middle of the woods, on the side of a mountain, it barely fazed me. In fact, it really intrigued me. You hear a lot of stories about feral people in the hills out here and all that, and they're the first thing I thought of. But I told myself that was stupid. None of that's real. And worrying about it shouldn't stop me from checking out something cool that I'd never seen before. So I, like the idiot I am, knelt down by the mysterious stairs in the woods. I used my phone flashlight to illuminate them, and saw an earthen tunnel that led down to a dead end, with little bits of rock and roots sticking out. There was absolutely nothing else, but just seeing that wasn't enough for me. I figured there had to be more to it. Had to be some reason the stairs were there, but it occurred to me that it might be some kind of trap. That as soon as I stepped down into it, someone might block the entrance. Even if feral people aren't really out here, I figured it couldn't hurt to be at least kind of careful. So I stood back up and shouted for my friend Greg, who I'd left behind a little way down the trail because he had to take a piss. He shouted back that he was on his way and rushed up to me, and I showed him the stairs and asked him to keep a lookout while I investigated. He agreed, saying that it was weird as hell and that I was fucking crazy, but whatever, man. So I went down the stairs. There were about 15 of them. I poked around, searched the dirt walls for signs of secret entrances, messages, anything interesting. I found nothing. So I headed back up. About halfway up the stairs, I got hit by a really bad bout of dizziness, like vertigo, and I had to stop because I almost fell backwards back down them. I kind of curled forward and closed my eyes for a second. When I opened them, the light from above was much more dim, like the sky was clouded over, but there had been no clouds in the sky before. I climbed the rest of the stairs and found Greg there waiting for me, but he was different. I couldn't really place how. Part of it was the weird way he was staring at me, like blank and cold and shocked all at the same time. I was pretty sure he was wearing a different outfit than he'd been in before, but I was also pretty sure he hadn't brought a second one with him. And even if he had in case of an emergency, the idea that he'd just randomly changed clothes while I was down the stairs seemed really stupid. I wanted to ask him about it, but I couldn't bring myself to. I told him there was nothing down in the tunnel, and he didn't say anything back, just kept staring. I asked him what was up, why he was being so quiet, whether something had freaked him out. He still didn't say anything. At this point, I figured he was messing with me, and it honestly pissed me off. I wasn't about to just stand there begging him to talk to me, so I started down the trail again the way we'd been heading before. I had a really bad, weird feeling, obviously, and was just about done with everything. But we were far enough along the loop that it made more sense to keep going than to turn back. Greg walked behind me and didn't talk the whole way to the lot. We'd ridden there together, in his car. But when we got to the parking lot, I didn't see it anywhere. In fact, the lot, which I was positive had been paved, was now just packed down dirt. The cars there all looked kind of old-fashioned, and I didn't recognize the logos on any of them. The trail was a simple loop. There should have been no way for us to end up in any other parking lot. So I was finally like, Greg, what's going on? But he just looked at me and still wouldn't open his stupid mouth. Honestly, I had kind of a meltdown divided by breakdown divided by freak out. No matter what I said, Greg wouldn't respond. I think once I wore myself out, shock set in. I followed Greg to some weird blue car that looked like it was made in the 50s. Maybe. Got in. He pulled out onto a road that I didn't recognize. We passed houses and other buildings I had never seen in my life. All of them looked old-fashioned, but not old. When we passed signs, I didn't recognize the writing on them, not just the language, but the writing itself was totally unfamiliar, kind of like Russian, but also totally different than that. I guess I can't really describe it. That's when I figured I must be dreaming and calmed down a bit. Even though everything was way more realistic than any dream I've ever had. I could smell gas and pine trees and dirt. I felt grit sliding under my shoes on the floor mat. I pinched the side of my leg, and it hurt. By the time we pulled up to the building, I wasn't so sure I was dreaming anymore. I didn't recognize it. It was 3 stories, with some kind of butcher shop on the first floor and what looked like apartments above it. Then my mom stepped out the front door of the butcher shop, wearing a white apron. I got out and half jogged over to her. The instant I did, I saw that she was looking at me the same way Greg did, all cold and weird with her mouth clamped shut. I knew that if I said anything to her, she wouldn't answer. And past her, through the window of the butcher shop, there was some smoked meat hanging up. I don't want to say what it looked like it was from. I know how this all sounds already, and I was in state of shock and panic. Besides, I couldn't bring myself to focus on it for too long. I walked past my mom, where there was another door beside the butcher one, up those stairs and into the apartment, or I guess townhouse above it. It felt kind of like I was on autopilot, like my feet were taking me there on their own. I still don't recognize anything. I'm so terrified and exhausted that I almost feel high. I found a bedroom that obviously wasn't the master. That almost looks like it could maybe be mine, I guess. Got in and shut the door, locked it, and laid down on the bed. There are posters for movies in here that I've never heard of, with text I can't read. I pulled my phone out, and I still have service. I'm still connected to the internet. The normal internet that I can read. My mom and someone who sounds like my dad are standing outside the door, talking. They aren't speaking English, or any language I've ever heard. To be honest, I'm not even sure I should be calling it talking or speaking. They're clearly saying things to each other and answering each other. Only it's like weird, short glottal sounds and a bunch of hissing interspersed with a few syllables here and there. I checked the window, and there's no good way out or down. I'm on the 3rd floor, and there's a concrete sidewalk right below. Plus, there's a guy standing there, staring up through the window, who looks exactly like me. I'm not sure when this numbness is going to fade, when I'll start freaking out again. I'm using the time I have while still being calm to try to find information on what could possibly be going on. And if there's a way for me to get back home without leaving this room, I don't think I can leave this room. My phone is low on battery though, and I don't know if I'll be able to charge it with anything here. If you've ever heard of anything like this, please tell me. I'll take any information I can get. Google's turning up nothing but stuff about stairs in the woods that lead upward. Nothing like this exactly. Pretty sure I can feel the panic coming back. The doorknob's jiggling now. They're trying to get in. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If you dare to explore further, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling tales of horror and the supernatural. Remember, the shadows hold endless mysteries, waiting to be unveiled. Stay tuned for more bone-chilling stories as we continue to traverse the eerie depths of the unknown together. Until next time, may your dreams be free from the haunting echoes of our tales. Or perhaps not.